So today I'm talking with Jennifer Purpura. Hope I pronounced that right.
You did. You did.
And she's with Miracle Ear. And today we're going to be talking about how hearing can be affected by heart disease. So I thought that was a really interesting subject. So it was something I didn't know about.
It is. It's a real interesting topic. And this was a hot topic in the month of February, which is just wrapping up here. But most of us know at this point that heart disease, it's incredibly common. It's such a serious condition. I think we're always focused on the C word, cancer, and we're thinking about all of
Mm-hmm.
these other conditions, diabetes and all of that. But heart disease, I mean, it's the number one killer of us women and well, men alike, both men and
Right.
women. But I mean, the correlation of hearing loss and heart disease is one of those things we're not thinking of, right? It's not something that's on the forefront, regardless of our age. And I think one of the things that we're so lucky about now, or so lucky to have now, is just the advanced healthcare. I think we're a little bit more heart conscious if we've got
Mm-hmm.
family history of heart disease or whatever the case may be. In the back of our heads, regardless of our age, we're starting to think a little bit more of our overall health. We're thinking about our stress levels. We're thinking about eating healthy. We're thinking about getting enough sleep, exercising, not smoking, all those great things. But we're also not taking into consideration that regardless of if any of those above things are contributing to heart disease or if we have family history of heart disease, that likely there is a correlation between your heart health and hearing loss. Your ears or the auditory system is supplied by so many arteries, just like everything else in our body. So we
Mm-hmm.
need that sufficient blood flow. We need to have that proper function. And so there's a lot of correlation in which, when you think about hearing loss, most of us will think about, if I've had an ear infection, that's not really quite the type of hearing loss we're talking about. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about hearing loss that is permanent. And then that's what affects most of us, regardless of heart disease or not, is that because of noise, because of what we're exposed to. And keep in mind, we're all being exposed to noises at a much younger age nowadays. It's a crazy, noisy world out there,
Yeah.
right? We've got AirPods on, we're listening to stuff constantly, the music and whatnot. So, but when we talk about the damage, the damage I'm making reference to is the damage, in the inner ear. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not talking about fluid in the middle ear or an ear infection or anything like that, something conductive in nature. But this damage typically results in a sensory neural hearing loss, which is a hearing loss that's down in the inner ear. And when you hear sensory neural, it means permanent. Now, the good news is when we catch hearing loss early, we have the ability to help those individuals, with amplification,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where Miracle Ear comes in. If somebody is suffering from high blood pressure or they've got, cardiovascular disease, going back to that reduced blood flow, it's likely, correlated with the, some of the blood flow going to the cochlea, and so it's common for us to have patients who, share with us, after we've done, we've gone through the health history and whatnot, and we, determined that, yeah, they have some history of heart, issues or high blood pressure. It's not incredibly uncommon for us to see some loss in those high frequencies as a result of, and we don't know with certainty that it's a result of that because they may have worked in noise, so,
Mm-hmm.
but it is related. With time, it's amazing how we will have a patient who say is a regular checkup, but because of some of their heart issues that they've been having, we'll notice a bigger, change. And you can't help but wonder, is the ringing of the ears a result of, what they've been going through, when it comes to
Yeah.
recent heart issues or whatever the case may be. So it's always interesting to follow them along, their path to see how much it is affecting them, so.
Yeah, it makes sense. I wouldn't have thought that that was something. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it now. I guess it's just something that isn't mentioned very often.
It
But I know
isn't.
that my dad had some heart disease. He had several angioplasties, and he
Um,
ended up having hearing aids.
mhm.
So but I didn't really realize that it was connected to
And
that.
it could
And it,
have been. And
yeah,
remember, usually it's multifaceted. So who knows? I mean, if dad worked in noise at any time in his life or if he
not
had history of
really.
military, no, not really. So it really can't help but make you wonder, right? If that
Mhm.
relationship between his heart disease and hearing loss, if there was, that correlation there, and so really, really common for us to hear this. And again, ringing of the ears. Now, sometimes they're put on various different medications that will, fluctuate the blood pressure and whatnot. Real common for patients who experience ringing of the ears. But the correlation with the heart disease, hearing loss, and ringing or tinnitus is and they all tie together, so it's very interesting that your father too experienced.
Yeah, I mean, he was in World War II, but yeah, he
Mhm.
didn't experience the hearing loss until much later.
So much later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it comes to hearing loss, regardless of again heart history or whatnot, most of us, the people around us notice it more than we do. So
Hmm.
chances are, when dad was going through all of that, the little things that are noticed is I'm in a noisy environment, I'm having a hard time understanding speech. I can hear, I just can't quite understand. That's one of the
Hmm.
most common things we hear. But when individuals who have that sensory neural permanent hearing loss, it's not uncommon for them to hear the low frequencies a little bit better than those higher frequencies. And again, when we're talking about, the correlation between heart health, when we talk about that vascular, compromised blood flow potentially to the cochlea and affecting those nerve endings, it's going to
Yeah.
be those high frequencies first, and everybody sounds like they're mumbling, when that happens. And again, the loved ones like yourself or, any other family members, they were probably more likely to go, Dad, might be time to get your hearing tested,
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's like,
so
what?
it's
What'd you say?
uh-huh. And when you're the one going through it, you don't know what you're missing. It's kind of like when we get our eyes tested and then they go ahead and show you which is better, this or this. And you go, oh my goodness, we're so much
Hmm.
more likely to take that extra step to take care of our, vision. But hearing aids, they've always had, people tend to put it on that back burner. And, at Miracle Ear, our biggest goal is just to raise that awareness, you know, what makes me so proud to be I've been fitting Miracle Ear hearing aids since the year 2000. So it's been 20 something years now that I've been, a part of Miracle Ear and, since I first became a part of Miracle Ear. And what I love is being able to, let people know as they ask me questions because, my mom, she's in that age range where they're all her and her girlfriends are in their 60s and they corner me and they say, Jennifer, I'm starting to notice, again, background noises, things aren't as clear when I'm on my
Yeah.
cell phone. If I'm not using both ears, I'm really having a hard time. Or I find myself having to use FaceTime a lot more. Never had to
Mm.
do that. But I notice that I need to be looking at my daughter. I need to be looking at my son. And my biggest advice to them is get your hearing tested. Hearing testing is free. It's no obligation at Miracle Ear. Go to your nearest. I mean, we've got over 1,500 centers across the United States. Go and visit a Miracle Ear center. Get that hearing test. It's the first step to saying, is there an issue? Is there not? Because we are all experiencing some degree of hearing loss earlier and earlier in life, comparative to
Uh-huh.
what we were seeing decades ago. And so it's so incredibly important to be proactive. Just see what's going on. Because a lot of times you've got a lot of people who are kind of like, I don't know. Our commitment is making sure we can let you know where you're at. It's no
Hmm.
obligation, like I said. Heart health was our big topic in the month of February, but coming up here in the month of March, actually in just a few days, actually, come
That's
to think of
right.
it, we're
Yeah.
talking March 3rd, right? We actually have World Hearing Days coming up, and there's various different, messages around hearing in several months out of the year. But, World Hearing Day is March 3rd. And so that's another big time, for us to really try to get as many people into the test booth as possible because the amount of people out there who have unaddressed hearing loss, it's mind-boggling, just like heart disease, the amount of us out
Right.
there who are living with heart disease and not aware. But again, that it's so incredibly important that we see where we're at regardless of what has caused that hearing loss, if it was noise, if it's a hereditary loss, if it's just simple aging, because with
Hmm.
time we're exposed to more. And so I think the upcoming March 3rd World Hearing Day, it kind of shines a little bit more light on hearing loss and the common misconceptions people have around hearing problems. Just get out there and get the hearing tested. So incredibly important because the old saying is if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
That
I think a lot of times people put that off because it's just not like a normal part of a medical exam, for
You're
one
bringing
thing.
up such a good point. I mean,
Mhm.
think about it. Your physician meets up with you. What are they doing? They're taking your blood pressure, they're checking your
Right.
oxygen, they're doing the typical labs. But how often are our regular family practitioners or internists or whoever we're following up with, often are they speaking to the effects of untreated hearing loss? And,
Right.
hearing loss in general, and it's so important that they too, are aware because, like you said, it's not on our arsenal, right? We think about our
Yeah.
blood pressure as we hit a certain age. We think about going to the dermatologist, to the cardiologist, to all these various different physicians. But, for some reason, hearing is just one of those things that it's not always on the forefront of the average individual's mind, right? So,
Right. Yeah. I mean, all they really deal with is maybe wax in your ears or
exactly.
something like that,
Exactly, exactly. Which if an individual is lucky enough to only have wax and no other
Hmm.
issues, but still, even if a person is susceptible, there are, I say a wax making machine. They're just somebody who's susceptible. And wax is good. It's helping to protect our ears. We want some wax. But if it's occluding, that's when the doctor will have that conversation with you that, perhaps we should be removing this. But I still
Yeah.
say, get the hearing tested. Every adult out there should at least get a baseline, find out where they're at.
Uh-huh.
And when we do a hearing evaluation, we're not just looking at how well we're hearing individual frequencies, but we also test speech because hearing is one thing, but the way we understand words and understand speech is something incredibly different. And so those
Hmm.
two scores tied together and having an understanding of what those scores mean are so incredibly important. And if we don't get tested, we don't know where we're at. But
Right.
circling back to
How,
the, oh, go
oh,
ahead.
I was just wondering, with Medicare, I know
Mm-hmm.
that they have supplemental plans that cover hearing. Does that
Mm-hmm.
cover that?
One of the things, years ago, we'd always say, oh, you're on a Medicare plan. No, you're kind of out of luck. And unfortunately, hearing aids is one of those coverages, durable medical equipment that has not been, historically covered. But I will
Hmm.
say you are seeing more and more of those supplemental plans or, standard insurance plans putting money forth towards that of hearing instruments. So I
Right.
always tell people first and foremost, get that hearing tested and then look into, check with your insurance to see. And our professionals are always willing to work side by side, with those individuals to dive into what they have in regards to coverage. Now, rarely do we have individuals who have full coverage, where it's going to take care
Right.
of everything, like everything else in the world, I
It's like
guess,
dental.
nowadays.
Yeah, dental and vision is the same.
But it's incredible how much more we are seeing it. It's becoming more and more common. When I started fitting hearing aids decades ago, it was only those select companies that would put forth or various different unions or auto workers or whatever the case is. But it makes me happy to see that more and more people in our core audience are those who are on Medicare with that supplemental insurance. They're starting to see those coverages or at minimum receive a discount because of having that coverage. So
Hmm.
one or the other. And again, it all kind of goes back to the importance, understanding how many people out there are, and it comes down to safety too. When you think about it, how many of us we're living longer lives. We want to ensure that we're understanding, obviously instructions if you go to see your doctor, or if you just
Hmm.
think, at the home level, if your daughter's at the door and she's ringing the doorbell and mom or dad can't hear, or they're not hearing the phone ringing, an alarm going off, a lot of those high frequency sounds are what they start missing out on. And there's so
Yeah.
many things we can go on and on when it comes to safety, but the start of it all is getting that free, no obligation test. And, another thing that makes me so proud to be a part of Miracle Ears, it's not just a transactional experience. They don't just fit you with hearing aids and send you on your way. The follow-ups are incredible. The
Hmm.
aftercare, you have regular checkups multiple times throughout the years, adjustments if there's any issues, cleanings are included, your annual hearing evaluations are always included because, we just talked about heart health. If you think about, our heart health, my father, what his hearing and heart health was, say, in his mid to late 50s, is very different than what it is now as he's approaching 70, as an example.
Hmm.
And so, when you compare as time goes on, the constant checking, when it comes to one's hearing loss and, having those annual evaluations because, health changes. Our patients suffer from diabetes, they suffer from heart disease, TIAs or strokes. And so again, that lack of, when we talked about the vascular, effects, when it comes to the hearing, the lack of blood flow, to
Right.
maintain that
Yeah.
proper function, it's key. And so that's going to change with time for all of us, so
Yeah.
important that
Ugh,
we
don't look forward to
keep up.
that.
None of us look forward to this. They say the golden years, right?
What else can cause hearing loss that maybe would affect
The
how you hear?
number one cause is noise, is what we're being exposed to day in, day out. Now, you know,
Oh.
years ago, we always correlated this with, somebody like your father who was maybe in World War II, or they served in the military, they were an officer, they were, a firefighter, they work in a factory, construction worker, carpentry, they're exposed to constant heavy machine noise. Naturally,
Mm-hmm.
with time, that's going to affect their hearing, and more often, or what's more noticeable at first is usually those high frequencies because they're saying I can hear my kids, but I can't understand them. I can hear my wife, but I'm not understanding what she's saying. She sounds like she's mumbling, especially when she's behind me. So we always correlate with loud jobs, but you'd be amazed at how many, when I think of us females, the old traditional jobs when we used to, secretaries, or, some of our teachers. Oh my goodness, some of the high frequency losses that you will see, because that's just constant ruckus. It's not that it's loud noise like a machine running or an
Yeah.
engine all day long, but we are exposed to a lot. You think about a phone operator who's got a headset on all day long for decades of her life. It's going to take its toll on her hearing because of what she, or his hearing for that matter, over time. So it doesn't have to be loud machine noise. It's just simply what we're exposed to. And that's where us experiencing hearing loss at younger ages is coming into play because of all the things that we have in our, I mean, you think about the youth today, they've all got earbuds on, they all have headphones on, they've got their,
Well,
their Bose or
that
their,
was something I wanted to ask you about because, like, I'm a baby boomer.
Mhm.
Obviously, we went to rock concerts, and
Yes.
it got pretty loud and punk rock, and I can understand that being a part of it. But like, what about wearing those devices? Does that
It has
hurt your
even a
ears?
larger impact, to be honest. I mean, I was like you. We've all been to those concerts where it's so loud. You're close to the stage. You walk
Yeah.
out and you get in the car with your friends or family members, and everybody sounds like chipmunks. You've got that, we call that a temporary threshold shift, where it's a
Hmm.
shift temporarily, but then it kind of recovers, as you get home that night and things seem back to normal, or hopefully by the next morning. But all of
Hmm.
those consistent temporary threshold shifts are going to add up to a permanent threshold shift, which is a permanent nerve damage. I
Yeah.
would rather have an experience like that here and there. We should be wearing hearing protection, of course, but we didn't do that back then. But
Yeah.
I would much rather have a couple temporary threshold shifts like that than to have something in my ears at all times. Again, so how many of our positions, our jobs, people have those earbuds in their ears constantly, and so
I know. I
um,
wonder about that. Besides, like, I wonder if headsets are better than earbuds, or I don't know,
yeah,
because
I
people are
mean,
listening to podcasts and all kinds of
it
things.
really
Yeah.
depends on how loud we're playing it, right? So
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
pretty
But
incredible. I mean,
not the
that's
actual thing just sticking in your eardrum, right? I mean, because it goes pretty far in your ear.
yeah. I mean, the old thing is that the closer it is to the tympanic membrane or your eardrum, the more likely you're gonna get more volume, but you're probably not cranking it up as much as, let's just say, if you had a headset on, then you're probably crank. So you're adjusting, to the given
Uh-huh.
situation. So when the earbuds are in the ears, yeah, it's probably a little bit louder, but hopefully they're not putting them quite as high. But I don't know
Yeah.
about you. I've been in grocery stores and I've been, various places where I'm like, I mean, I can hear the whole phone conversation and they've got earbuds. So
Yeah,
I,
right. I know it's loud, especially you live in a big city. I live in LA, so
yeah,
I can get
yeah,
loud.
it's a perfect. I mean, you think about the ambient noise that's in the environment just by stepping outside, and when you get,
Hmm.
into, the more urban areas, there's just a constant hum, constant
Hmm.
noise in that environment. And so we
Yeah,
live in a noisy world, right?
we
We
do.
truly live in a noisy world. So, our exposure to noises is the biggest contributor to that sensory neural permanent hearing loss. That's the biggest, and again, things like our heart health, deprivation, of the blood supply, various different medications could be ototoxic,
Hmm.
and or cause ringing of the ears and some, gradual high frequency loss. And so chemo, various different treatments in which, individuals will go through may be ototoxic to
Yeah.
one's hearing. There's a lot of things that can contribute on the outside, but you know, if you just sit down with a bunch of friends, chances are what they've been exposed to is what's causing any type of loss, if they have any at all. And it's not just our occupations, it's just what we're exposed to. And I know we talk about presbycusis, which is, hearing loss from age, from aging, but it's not getting old. We're not getting old and then just suddenly getting a hearing loss. But let's be honest, if I'm 70 years old, chances are I've been exposed to a lot more. My ears have been
I just
a lot
turned
more.
70.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. exactly then. But a young 20-year-old, as an example, they just have that, you've got 50 years of noise on them, and so
Yeah.
that's something to take into consideration as well. It's just with age, we've heard more in time. And
Yeah.
but we think about those
Things wear
occupations that
out.
yeah, things wear out. They do, and so nerve damage, it's a doozy, but nerve damage is permanent, and so I
Hmm.
think that's the biggest thing to drive home. And as I mentioned, when we perform those speech understanding scores with our patients, and as we perform a full, complete evaluation at the time of a new test or at any one of those annual evaluations, those are the things we're paying attention to. We're paying attention to hearing, but more so that understanding. Have we dropped in understanding? Because the brain can be hearing the sound, but I may say to you the word carve with a V at the end, and you may have just heard car. Sometimes those
Uh-huh.
nice, sharp, crisp consonants, the V and the th and the Z,
Yeah.
they're not quite as obvious or quite apparent. Now, if we're looking at each other, it's one thing, but just regular conversation, if you and I were sitting in the car together, those are the sounds people are missing out on. And if you
Yeah.
put noise into the equation, it just makes it even more difficult by rule. And that's where hearing help comes in. We can keep things stimulated. So again, again, as I said earlier, if you don't use it, you lose it. And we want to make sure we keep everything stimulated so we can have you to the best of your hearing ability. That's what's most important.
That sounds great. Well, thank you for all this. This is really good information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It
Yeah.
was so nice meeting you. I love everything that you're doing, with your blog. It's just great stuff out there, fantastic articles around so many various different topics that are
Oh,
important to
thank you. Thanks for
everyone.
checking it out.
To everyone, and so I
Yeah.
think it's, you're doing great stuff out there, and it's incredible, again, just raising awareness. And when things aren't
Hmm.
on the forefront, like you said, when you go to your regular physician, they're probably not talking to you about this stuff. Good ones are, but
Oh,
not all of them.
yeah, there's a lot of things that are missing sometimes.
Absolutely. And and we can all create a laundry list of things, but that's, how things are. And so raising awareness through friends, family members, blogs, things like, what you're doing right now, this is key and this is important. So thank you for helping to spread the word. Again, as I said, as we get into the month of March here and we talk about, World Hearing Day and, all these various different things,
Mhm.
that's all it's about, is raising awareness, and
Right.
so that people do take advantage of the services that are out there, take advantage of those free hearing tests, see where you're at. It's so incredibly important. Get the family members involved. If your wife is
Hmm.
on if your loved one, the kids, they're, anybody is, on their case, bring them in, have them come in with you for that hearing evaluation. It's really important,
Yeah, that
so
is good. That's good
yeah,
advice. Well,
absolutely.
thanks. Thanks so
You're
much. I'm
very
gonna,
welcome. It was so nice meeting you, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend with me.